Welcome to the Appendix, where we read the primary sources of the past so the present can be better understood. Today's primary source, Jefferson's opinion on the constitutionality of the bank, February 15, 1791. As found in The Writings of Thomas Jefferson, edited by H. E. Braw, Volume 3, page 145. The bill for establishing a national bank in 1791 undertakes, among other things, 1. To form the subscribers into a corporation, 2. To enable them, in their corporate capacities, to receive grants of land, and so far is against the laws, mortmain. 3. To make alien subscribers capable of handling lands, and so far is against the laws of alienage. 4. To transmit these lands on the death of a proprietor to a certain line of successors, and so far changes the course of descendants. 5. To put the lands out of the reach of forfeiture or escheat, and so far is against the laws of the forfeiture and escheat. 6. To transmit personal chattel to successors in a certain line, and so far is against the laws of distribution. 7. To give him the sole and exclusive right of banking under the national authority, and so far is against the laws of monopoly. 8. To communicate to them a power to make laws paramount to the laws of the states, for so they must be construed to protect the institution from the control of the state legislatures, and so probably they will be construed. I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid on this ground, that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, or to the people, 12th Amendment. To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specifically drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power, no longer susceptible of any definition. The incorporation of a bank and the powers assumed by this bill have not, in my opinion, been delegated to the United States by the Constitution. They are not among the powers specially enumerated, for these are 1. A power to lay taxes for the purpose of paying the debts of the United States, but no debt is paid by this bill, nor any tax laid. Were it a bill to raise money, its organization in the Senate would condemn it by the Constitution. 2. To borrow money, but this bill neither borrows money nor insures the borrowing of it. The proprietors of the bank will be just as free as any other money holders to lend, or not to lend, their money to the public. The operation proposed in the bill, first, to lend them 2 millions, and then borrow them back again, cannot change the nature of the later act, which will still be a payment and not a loan. Call it by what name you please. 3. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states and with the Indian tribes. To erect a bank and to regulate commerce are very different acts. He who erects a bank creates a subject of commerce in its bills. So does he who makes a bushel of wheat or digs $1 out of the mines. Yet neither of these persons regulates commerce thereby. To make a thing which may be bought and sold is not to prescribe regulations for buying and selling. Besides, if there were an exercise of the power of regulating commerce, it would be void, as extending as much to the internal commerce of every state as it is external. For the power given to Congress by the Constitution does not extend to the internal regulation of the commerce of a state, which remains exclusively with its own legislature, but to its external commerce only. That is to say, its commerce with another state, or with foreign nations, or with the Indian tribes. Accordingly, the bill does not propose the measure as a regulation of trade, but as productive of considerable advantage to trade. Still less are these powers covered. Still less are the powers covered by any other of the special enumerations. Nor are they within either of the general phrases, which are the two following. 1. To lay taxes to provide for the general welfare of the United States, that is to say, to lay taxes for the purpose of providing for the general welfare. For the laying of taxes is the power, and the general welfare the purpose for which the power is to be exercised. Congress are not to lay taxes ad libitum for any purpose they please, but only to pay the debts or provide for the welfare of the Union. In like manner, they are not to do anything they please to provide for the general welfare, but only to lay taxes for that purpose. To consider the latter phrase, not as describing the purpose of the first, but as giving a distinct and independent power to do any act they please, which might be for the good of the Union, would render all the preceding and subsequent enumerations of power completely useless. It would reduce the whole instrument to a single phrase, that of instituting a Congress with power to do whatever would be for the good of the United States, and as they would be the sole judges of the good or evil, it would be also a power to do whatever evil they pleased. It is an established rule of construction where a phrase will bear either two meanings, to give it that which will allow some meaning to the other parts of the instrument, and not that which will render all the others useless. Certainly no universal power was meant to be given them. It was intended to lace them up straightly with the enumerated powers, and those without which, as means, these powers could not be carried into effect. It is known that the very power now proposed as a means was rejected as an end by the convention which formed the Constitution. A proposition was made to them to authorize Congress to open canals, and a mandatory one to empower them to incorporate. But the whole was rejected, and one of the reasons of objection urged in debate was that they then would have a power to erect a bank, which would render great cities, where there was prejudice and jealousies on that subject, adverse to the reception of the Constitution. 2. The second general phrase is, to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution the enumerated powers. But they can all be carried into execution without a bank. A bank, therefore, is not necessary, and consequently not authorized by this phrase. It has been much urged that a bank will give great felicity or convenience in the collection of taxes. Suppose this were true, yet the Constitution allows only the means which are necessary, not those which are merely convenient, for effecting the enumerated powers. If such a latitude of construction be allowed to this phrase as to give any non-enumerated power, it will go into every one, for there is no one which ingenuity may not torture into a convenience in some way or another to someone of so long a list of enumerated powers. It would swallow up all the delegated powers and reduce the whole to one phrase, as before observed. Therefore it was that the Constitution restrained them to the necessary means, that is to say, to those means without which the grant of the power would be nugatory. Perhaps bank bills may be a more convenient vehicle than treasury orders, but a little difference in the degree of convenience cannot constitute the necessity which the Constitution makes the grounds for assuming any non-enumerated power. Can it be thought that the Constitution intended that, for a shade or two of convenience more or less, Congress should be authorized to break down the most ancient and fundamental laws of the several states, such as those against mortmain, the law of alienage, the rules of descent, the acts of distribution, the laws of escheat and forfeiture, and the laws of monopoly. Nothing but a necessary, invincible by other means, can justify such a prostration of laws, which constitute the pillar of our whole system of jurisprudence. Will Congress be too straight-laced to carry the Constitution into honest effect, unless they may pass over the foundation laws of the state governments for the slightest convenience to theirs? The negative of the President is the shield provided by the Constitution to protect against the invasion of the legislature. 1. The rights of the executive. 2. Of the judiciary. 3. Of the states and state legislatures. The present is the case of a right remaining exclusively with the states, and is consequently one of those intended by the Constitution to be placed under his protection. It must be added, however, that unless the President's mind on a view of everything which is urged for and against this bill is tolerably clear, that it is unauthorized by the Constitution, if the pro and the con hang so evenly as to balance his judgment. A just respect for the wisdom of the legislature would naturally decide the balance in favor of their opinion. It is chiefly for cases where they are clearly misled by error, ambition, or interest that the Constitution has placed a check in the negative of the President. Thank you for joining us for our primary source today on the Appendix. We will see you in the stacks.